Is human rights. Mine is human life. Shoot them dead. Order bago ni Mayor. Di lang daw mo patyon. Kung silo na mo bisong, wala na bisong, wala na may silbi. Mahirap kayo, magtiis kayo sa hirap at gutom, wala akong pakialam.
Parang alipin po tayo ng China. Parang wala tayong katapatan sa sarili natin. Nasakupan.
I just simply love Xi Jinping. He understood, he understands my problem, and is willing to help. And I'd like to say thank you, China. Ikaw, ABS-CBN, I will see to it that you're out. There's nothing really to be extra scared of that coronavirus thing.
We were excellent. Na-control po natin ang pagkalat ng sakit.
The Philippines' total COVID-19 caseload reaches 1 million Monday, as the Health Department logs 8,929 new confirmed infections.
Maliit na bagay ito sa buhay natin. Marami tayong dinaanan, mas grabe, mas mahirap, mas namululuha ngayon. Gusto ko nang umiyak sa harap ninyo.
Hindi lahat may ayuda, hindi lahat nakakuha ng sapat na ayuda. Gutom yung mga Pilipino and kailangan natin magkaroon ng action.
Walang isip yung mga gagawin yan. What they just do is just to show to the people that they care, but they do not really care because of their ignorance.
Dapat hindi masamain ng gobyerno dahil tumutulong na nga sila eh. Tapos binibigyan pa nila ng ibang kahulugan.
Pagbulag ka na, no? Hindi mo na di-differentiate ang liwanag sa dilim.
Hi, I'm Bekopin and you are watching Rappler. A little under a year from now, we are going to make a decision that will dictate where the Philippines goes. A lot is at stake in the 2022 presidential elections, and on Rappler, our goal is clear. The hero in the story is us, the voter. Guys, ito yung chance. Tayo yung bida time na to. Because back in 2016, our hashtag for the elections was hashtag the leader I want. This time, we want to highlight you, the voter, because you are the main character in the 2022 elections. Hashtag we decide. Atin ang Pilipinas highlights our duty to reclaim our country from the forces that have brought us where we are today. We believe and we know that we can reclaim our nation by voting. And what better way to educate and tell stories than by asking questions? Welcome to Page Vote Dialogues. Simple lang naman yung goal natin dito. So yung gusto natin, mag-usap tayo. Here we bring together veteran journalists, experts, Rappler's own editorial team, thought leaders from different fields, the creatives, entertainment, sports, music, advocacy, and you, the viewer, wherever it is that you're watching this from, because you want to understand each other better. So if you've been cooped up at home or kung hindi man, sobrang limited ng movement mo the past 15 months or so, same. We've been in different forms of lockdown since March 2020 as a precaution against the coronavirus pandemic. And although more Filipinos are getting vaccinated, medyo malayo-layo pa tayo sa katotohanan, sa ating goal. And even as we struggle with distribution issues, vaccine hesitancy, surges in different parts of the country, we also have the 2022 elections and the campaign to think about. So tonight, let's talk about the pandemic and the elections. Kasi sis, may pandemya pa rin. Joining me are karate athlete James De Los Santos. Hi, James.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here. It's really an honor.
Actress and advocate Ria Ataide.
Hi, Bea. Thank you again for having me here.
Hi, Ria. St. Luke's Medical Center College of Medicine Planetary and Global Health Program Inaugural Director, Dr. Renzo Ginto. I said that under one breath.
Correct. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here.
And of course, the one, the only, Rappler's own news editor, my colleague Paterno S. Macal II. Hello, Paterno.
Hello. At salamat James and Ria and Renzo and sa lahat ng mga nagpa-participate dito sa Zoom.
Hello guys. So good evening ladies and gentlemen sa mga nanonood on YouTube, Facebook, and on Zoom via this webinar. If you want to ask questions, make comments about the discussion, the pandemic and the 2022 elections, or you want to ask anything sa akin, although wag naman sana sa akin kasi wala akong alam, joke lang. Sa ating panelists, you can tweet using hashtag #WeDecide. You can also use the comment section of Facebook and YouTube. We have people monitoring that. Or if you're joining us via Zoom, you can just type your question in the Q&A tab. Ang dami ko nang sinabi, wala pa tayo sa discussion. So let's get to it. Sige. Siguro to start with, for the four of you here, kamusta the past 15 months?
Ikaw, kamusta, Char?
Ayan, blue na yung buhok ko. Ganyan ka-stressful yung 15 months.
Roller coaster, babe. I mean, I feel like for everybody, it's been a roller coaster of like one hell of a... It's just been something. Like, yeah. But yeah, there's still so many things to be grateful for and so many things to look forward to. And I think one of those is the fact that in a few months' time, we'll be electing a new set of leaders. And I think that's one of the things I'm really like, okay, we're going to be okay, you know? But you guys, how are you guys?
Yeah, well, as a physician and a public health specialist, this has been a very crazy year, diba? Imagine, siguro mga 5 to 10 years ago when I was still a medical student and a public health student, binabasa lang namin to sa libro diba? Na, we're just imagining that maybe someday, hopefully not within our lifetime, a pandemic like this will happen. And lo and behold, disease X, by the way, if you go to the website of WHO, may nakalagay doon mga listahan ng mga sakit na may pandemic potential. And nakalagay doon disease X. So that people will not feel complacent. There's always a possibility of an unknown disease emerging. And lo and behold, as I've said, 2020 was the year, 2019 actually, because if you remember, COVID-19 actually started towards the end of 2019. It's already 2021 and we're still far from, reaching the finish line. I hope I'm not painting a gloom and doom picture by saying that.
So, Kenzo, may follow-up lang ako. Kasi parang feeling ko nga, parang ang daming discussion na parang, we're living through history, which makes it sound easier. Pero hindi fun mag-live through history, sa totoo lang, no? Pero ikaw, like, paano ka nag-react? Kasi yun nga, parang, it's a crisis, obviously, but as a scientist, right? As someone who has literally studied this in textbooks before, how did you handle yung first few months siguro na, there's a global pandemic that's happening?
Right. Of course, parang nung nakikita mo yung early manifestations, narinig mo, it started in China and then one by one, the countries are getting affected. Parang like, wow, will this be just a brief episode? That's our hope. And then, unfortunately, that was not the case, as we now know, And, parang sabi ko nga pinag-aaralan lang namin before. And then parang like lahat ng inaral mo, kailangan mong ilabas and tignan, ito ba yung mga solutions? And the thing is, a lot of the solutions to the pandemic, we already knew. We already know. But unfortunately, and I guess this is why this discussion about the elections and choosing our next leaders is so crucial. Because even if we know the solutions, perhaps we need leaders who will actually make sure that the solutions are implemented and executed. And, unfortunately, that's not the situation that we see over the past year, not just in the Philippines, but around the world.
Yeah, for sure. James, kamusta the past 15 months?
Well, actually, I'm not like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, the pandemic was a good thing. It was not. Like, everybody was struggling since the beginning, but then, in my case though, fortunately, my sport karate was able to adapt to the virtual concept of competition. So when I found out about this, that's when I decided to participate in these virtual tournaments. And it was what made it even more amazing was that they developed there was a world ranking system for virtual kata. Kata is my division, by the way, which means forms. I started competing last year, and by October, I reached the world #1 spot, and until now, I'm still continuing to compete. And yeah, there's still many more tournaments coming this year. So I really look forward to bringing more honors to try and bring more medals home for the country. It's actually been despite the hard situation that we were in, it's been a great journey so far for me.
Si Paterno, alam ko na ish kung ano yung isasagot niya. Pero itatanong ko pa rin. Kunwari hindi tayo nag-uusap all the time. Pero like, kamusta yung last 15 months as a journalist during a pandemic?
Well, ito na nga yung mga nangyayari sa atin, palagi na lang nakaharap sa computer. Imbis na nasa isang kwarto tayo na may hawak na kape siguro at kaunting ensaymada, ito magkakaharap tayo dito sa Zoom. So yun yung, syempre may mga pros and cons, like as bilang journalist, mas gusto namin na nakikita kahit yung mga non-verbal cues. Actually hindi kahit lalo na yung mga non-verbal cues sa mga kausap mo, lalo na kung politiko yan. Kung nag-twitch o kung tumingin sa ibang direction. Pero syempre ito tayo ngayon, Zoom. But at the same time, bilang journalist, dahil napilitan tayong mag-Zoom, nagkaroon din naman ng positive aspect. Dahil dito naman sa right side nitong meeting natin, nakikita natin na marami tayong nakakasalamuhan na taga-iba-ibang bahagi ng Pilipinas na hindi naman talaga tayo nag-uusap-usap masyado noong lahat face-to-face. So, maraming pros and cons, pero ayun na nga, parang sabi nung isang katrabaho namin kanina sa Rappler, para tayong nasa isang sci-fi novel at sana maganda ang ending nito.
Black Mirror na, kaya wala silang bagong season. Kasi wala na daw need for a new season. Tinanong ko yun kasi nga parang interesting, di ba, from the different fields that we're in, like how we've had to adapt, not have to lang. We were forced to adapt to the situation. Like, especially, di ba, like, for the longest time, I also cover entertainment for Rappler, like, for the longest time, walang movie, walang bagong TV show, wala. There was nothing new on air for safety reasons. Now, I ask this kasi, di ba, parang nga, the past 15 months, ang daming nagbago sa professional, personal lives natin. So, paano na yung elections? Siguro simulan ko kay Patty kasi kung hindi nyo alam, veteran si Paterno in covering elections. He covered the COMELEC. Bata pa lang ako, tinitingala ko na si Paterno bilang reporter. Siguro Patty, kahit 3 major things, kung kaya mo ma-distill into 3, no, na parang na iba sa 2022 dahil nga nasa pandemya pa rin tayo.
So, salamat sa tanong na yan, Bea. No? Una, yung mode of conducting elections mismo. Dahil sa mga nakaraang eleksyon, ang pinagkakaabalahan lang ng Commission on Elections, yung syempre yung pagbibilang ng boto, paggamit ng makina, Yung sa kampanya naman, inaabangan lang yung mga dates actually at pag-i-implement ng mga election laws. Siyempre ngayon, nabago yan eh. So, nagkakaroon tayo ngayon ng mga tanong tungkol sa paano magiging safe yung mga tao sa halalan. Paano makakapagkampanya yung mga politiko sa safe na paraan din. Kasi ang mga kampanya sa atin, kailangan maraming tao yan eh. Nasa isang malaking stadium, mamimigay ng pagkain, minsan, hindi nang minsan, madalas namimigay din ng pera, pailalim. So, yan yung mga bagay na pwedeng magbago. Nakita natin yan dun sa Palawan plebiscite. A few months back, nagkaroon tayo ng prototype noon. Pwede natin pag-usapan mamaya yan. Yan yung una. Pangalawa, dahil mahirap gumawa ng magpatakbo ng eleksyon sa halalan at sasabihin ng mga ibang politiko na unsafe yan. Ang pangalawang bagay na kailangan nating antabayanan, yung threat, yung banta na itulak ng mga ibang political camps na wag na tayo mag-eleksyon sa 2022. Alam naman natin kung sino yung gusto ng tao, di ba? Patagalin na lang yung termino ng Pangulong Duterte. So yan yung pangalawang banta na sabihin hindi magagawa yung election na yan. So ano na lang, extend na lang yung mga termino. Pwede naman yan eh. So yan yung pangalawa. Yung pangatlong dapat nating antabayanan, tungkol pa rin, nakakonekta pa rin sa pandemya. No? Kasi yung pandemya, pinakita nito yung klase ng pamumuno ng mga leader ng iba-ibang bansa. At pag kinumpara mo yung mga estado, yung sitwasyon ng iba-ibang bansa, correlated yan dun sa klase ng pamumuno na meron yung bansang yon. So, itong pandemyang ito, kung titignan natin sa maayos na paraan, pwede natin itong makita bilang isang referendum sa nakaupong pamahalaan. Dahil imposible namang hiwalay yung eleksyon at saka pandemya. Kasi alam nyo, ang totoong leader, nakikita yung pamumuno hindi sa mga good times kahit naman yan sa mga kaibigan, hindi ba? Kahit sa mga karelasyon, hindi sa good times yan, kundi sa bad times. So, ano yung klase ng pamumuno na meron tayo ngayong nasa isang krisis ang Pilipinas at ang mundo? So, sana na-frame natin ng maayos, nakikita natin ng maayos na yung nangyayari sa atin dito sa pandemya ay konektado talaga sa eleksyon.
Right.
At syempre, bago pa magkaroon ng pandemya, marami rin tayong mga iba-ibang mga factors na kailangan nang i-consider. Napanood natin yan dun sa #WeDecide video na pinlay natin bago itong conversation natin. So, yan yung mga mahalagang pag-isipan So, maganda ring marinig yung mga thoughts nating lahat tungkol dito.
Yung interesting, no? Parang 2022, naging lalong important siya because of and in spite of this pandemic. Nabanggit mo nga, di ba, yung discussion on this referendum of leadership. For Ria, James, and Doc Renzo, like, how has that discussion been apparent sa spaces that we occupy, which is obviously for now mostly online? Like, may ganun bang mga discussion? Kamusta yung engagement, you think, between people who care and people who should be caring about the elections?
Okay, sige. Ako, I feel like kasi sometimes there's a tendency to be in an echo chamber.
Yeah.
Like, as much as it is being talked about, I'm not sure if it's actually reaching the people who don't think the same way or don't have the same insight. Parang, personally, I see a lot of efforts right now. And I mean, right now, the number of registered voters is 61 million, di ba? So I feel like, the numbers are almost there. Like, we're getting there. So I feel like people are getting more concerned. And I feel like din kasi, di ba, they say, diba, you're not really gonna react about something unless you're personally affected already. And I feel like we are all personally affected. Like, and if you're not angry at this point, it's like, okay, like I'm worried. Actually, what Paterno was saying was so heavy. Yung parang hearing, like those are thoughts I've had in my head, pero ang bigat, di ba? Yung parang to be reminded that that is the situation we are in. But yeah, I'm glad we have stuff like this to make it even more apparent online.
James?
Yeah, personally, like ever since this pandemic happened, like everything has been shifted to online. Like I mentioned earlier, my competitions were now online, and basically also like other things that I do, like my sidelines, my other types of work are also done online. So I also think that because people now are starting to adapt to this new normal. So I believe also like the elections will have to go through with the online, because we can't go doing face-to-face campaigns like we did before, just to follow the safety protocols. Although like there are some people who haven't adapted yet, like to the concept of everything that's going on online. We're slowly, I believe that we're still slowly starting to adjust, because there are people out there who aren't very technology savvy, but then eventually later on, because all the campaigns will start being online, and that's what will actually bring more awareness, like that will actually bring more people into learning how to adapt to this new normal. So yeah, that's really my perspective on this coming elections. I do believe that it'll all be done online.
Doc Renzo?
Yeah. So, the health sector where I belong to is, one, if not the most affected or badly hit sectors, right? The moment the first case arrived in the Philippines, it's the health sector that, responded. But what we also saw during the pandemic is that, of course, our health sector, but our whole society at large has so many defects, no? Ang ekonomiya, ang sistemang pangkalusugan, our education sector. So tama yung sinasabi ni Ria na kung hindi pa tayo nang gagalaiti ngayon at tumakbo sa presinto at pumili ng ating mga susunod na leader, ay hindi ko na alam kung ano pa ang magpapapunta sa atin at maging aktibo, no? Maging aktibong mga citizens ng ating bayan, no? Kanina yung sinasabi ni Paterno na this is a referendum. Ako naman, because I'm again from the medical sector, I always say, no, remember last year and even until today, we always talk about we need mass testing for COVID-19. I think that the real mass testing that we are seeing is the mass testing of leadership. Mass testing ng pamumuno. Sino ba yung mga pamumuno na mga pinuno na dapat nating suportahan, panatiliin sa kapangyarihan o iangat, no? At sino ba yung mga pinuno na nag-fail, no, during the pandemic and hindi na dapat bigyan ng pagkakataon at palitan na, no? So I think that should be, the discussion. And I think the pandemic, as you've said, no, it's really front and center in the elections. But we should also not use the pandemic as an excuse to not have elections, right? In fact, no, I think our goal as a Filipino society, no, as one country, is to make the elections happen even in the middle of the crisis, right? Because the elections, and I'm a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, no, but I think as a Filipino, we should all know and we should all internalize that the elections is perhaps the most explicit demonstration of our democracy. And if hindi mangyari yan, no, because of all these excuses or reasons, then paano pa ang kinabukasan ng ating bayan, no? So, that is, I think, our grandest challenge now, right? As Filipinos, making sure that the elections occur, even in spite of the crisis that we're facing now.
Paterno? Okay, akala ko may gusto kang sabihin. Naisip ko lang kasi 'di ba parang yun nga, parang whether we like it or not, our life is the internet. Like hindi na nga siya divorceable ngayon, hindi mo na mahiwalay yung online life mo sa real life mo. Kasi, I mean, we're kind of chained to our gadgets. For those who have gadgets, of course, bearing in mind na may mga tao ng access. And I talk about that kasi incumbency in Philippine elections and in any elections, honestly, it's always an advantage, di ba? So it's June 23 today. Usually candidacies are announced ng July, September, hindi August kasi ghost month yan. How do we get to know new candidates if that's the case? Kaya ba ng online lang? I'm putting it in air quotes because I don't want to minimize the power of online discussions, but like, how is that gonna work? If most of our interactions are limited to online interactions, and knowing that incumbency is a huge advantage in Philippine elections, and like you said, this is a referendum of leadership. It's time to mass test our leaders. Paano yun? How will we find new options? Or how should new options introduce themselves? Ang dami kong tanong. Pero siguro kung sino mang gusto mag-chime in on that notion.
Sige, ako magsisimula. Nagtititigan kami ni Ria, and I think actually my answer to that is we need the Rias of the country to help amplify the voices of these invisible but highly qualified candidates, right? We've already seen in past elections that, being a person of high competence, but also being a person of a high level of integrity is not enough in the era of social media, in the era of even Zoomification, right? So we need to identify sino ba yung mga credible voices natin na pwedeng maging kaakibat, no? And it's not just about endorsing candidates, right? It's all about, again, co-amplifying yung mga boses, no? And maybe Ria has some thoughts, no, about how she can use, for example, her platform so that those worthy candidates actually get the visibility, right? Of course, our media friends also will play a critical role, right? Like Rappler, right? If we can give as many platforms as we can for these candidates, I think the Filipino people will be more aware of alternatives, right? And it's not just about name recall, it's about telling the story, no? I would love to hear, these unknown but promising candidates to be who actually made a difference during the pandemic in ways big and small. They're the ones who should be leading us towards the recovery of the country towards our post-COVID future. And, unfortunately, the pandemic is, far from over, right? The light at the end of the tunnel is still too far. So, we need the next leaders to actually usher a healthy and better recovery. And I would love to hear who are these people who, did great stuff even behind camera, hindi nagpapogi, hindi nag-grand launching and ribbon cutting of, an isolation facility, delaying care for people. Who are these people? They should be the one to be put in power.
Yeah. Pressure. Joke lang.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you for the kind words. I think I agree that, people need to speak up because I really believe that parang when someone talks about something, even if people are apprehensive to talk about these things, it at least sparks an idea in their head. Yung parang nagiging inception levels, ganon, di ba? But I think beyond din kasi relying on the media and entertainment, I think it's also the duty of an individual to go towards, especially those na hindi same yung access to information, hindi same access to resources. So I think those things have to go hand in hand. We have to hit the grassroots, go to schools, go to LGUs. Really, more than educating, I agree, more than educating people about like the leader, I feel like there's also the need to educate about what exactly the roles of the leaders we elect are meant to be. And I think kasi there's a lot of confusion as to what a congressman does as opposed to what a governor does. I feel like, personally nga, sometimes I get confused then. And I feel like there are things na we can help with But yeah, I agree na dapat online and grassroots. And
Right.
personal, within the smallest spheres of influence. Family, friends, peers, colleagues. Parang no matter how many followers you have, you're an influencer so-and-so.
Singit lang
Alala
ako to Rhea.
Go ahead, go
Sabi
ahead.
niya, ano yung ginagawa ng congressman? Dapat hindi na yung nagtatayo ng basketball court. Although of course we support sports, right? Baka si James magalit sa akin. But you know, again, no, if there is a checklist, what have you done during the pandemic, right? You know, why are you worthy to be elected? Siguro that's another, tactic that we can do. But yes, no, I again, I'll laud Ria's comments. Yeah.
Actually,
Sorry, go Paterno. Go ahead.
maganda yung sinabi ni Ria. Ano ba yung mga powers and duties ng mga tatakbo. At actually, merong series niya ng Rappler. Ipapadala ko sa inyo ang link ngayon dito sa Zoom. So, ito yung powers and duties series na ginawa ng Rappler. So, iba-ibang mga iba-ibang mga article yan. Merong powers and duties of a president, vice president, senator, congressman, lahat. So, if you can click this link and share it with your friends, that would be helpful. Pangalawa, ang dadagdag ko lang din sa discussion kanina, bukod sa yung responsibility ng media at ng mga influencers din na tinatawag na ipakita kung sino yung mga iba pang mga kandidato, pinakamahalaga para sa akin yung responsibilidad ng bawat isa na kilalanin yung mga gantong kandidato. At hindi lang yon, yung hindi tatanggapin mo na lang basta na ganun talagang buhay eh. Hindi naman ng mga mananalo eh. Wala namang pag-asa dito eh. Yan. Alam nyo, yan ang pinakamalaking kalaban ng Pilipino tuwing eleksyon. Dahil iniisip ka agad na talo yan. Ang nananalo dito yung mga magnanakaw, yung mga sinungaling. Ganun talagang buhay eh. Wala tayong magagawa dyan. Yan ang pinakamalaking kalaban. At yan, nakasalala yan sa bawat isa sa atin.
On the spot ko ng konti si Ria at si James. Kasi, like, I recall Ria telling me this in a previous interview with her. One-on-one kami, like, talking about, being an influencer shouldn't be thought of as dapat, like, libo-libo yung followers mo. You're an influencer in your friend circle, family circle. Like, but for you guys especially, like, diba, parang you have a much bigger community, say, than the average person. Like, how do you approach that? Like, and do you feel that there's still hesitance on the part of your colleagues in sports and entertainment to actually, diba, use that platform, not necessarily to endorse, not necessarily to be partisan, but to engage in discussions of electoral politics, governance, or issues concerning the pandemic?
Okay. Let me answer this in two like separate statements. I think first it's like personally kasi my stand is everybody has a different way of showing their politics, I guess. Some people will be more vocal like me. Some people will be, that they'll keep it to themselves but they really believe in something. So I don't feel like parang it's hard to force kasi people to do things na if they speak biglang hindi nila mapaninindigan, diba? So parang I feel like I respect why they don't speak up, but I hope that they do reach a point where they do, because it is liberating and it's, more than, not to sound self-righteous or anything again, pero parang we're given like such a like great opportunity to give information to others who probably don't, like the echo chamber thing I was talking about. Maybe for me, it's an echo chamber. And for others, it isn't, diba? Like maybe my thoughts are new to them. So, naman yun. It's about challenging, I think, I don't know. It's just, I don't like forcing people to do things. But I hope they do. That's the thing. Like, I find the need for it now more than ever. And yeah, like I said earlier, if you're not mad pa, parang, hello, good morning to you. Yeah.
Well, I would say that like whether people speak up about their opinions or not, at the end of the day, they should also make the right decision in choosing which candidate is really best for the position. Like, okay, coming from the field of sports, like I would like encourage athletes to choose the candidates that will really not only care about the whole country in general, but also somebody who will support the athletes, especially like when they want to bring them into the world class level. Because based from my experience, when if you want to become a world class athlete, you can't just rely on purely training. You also need to go out and compete, and that's how you evaluate. That's how you evaluate yourself. You need to engage yourself with your competitors, so that you can evaluate your performance, whether you need to make any improvements or not. So we need also we need leaders who care about certain fields or industries, and they would focus on improving these sectors, and they would also have to like let's say, okay, there are certain candidates that have a certain role. So let's say they assign people into these other fields, like in the field of sports. We have the national sports associations. They are the ones like who are responsible for, like, let's say, for finding sponsors or gaining extra funds, if and only if the government can only provide so much for the athletes. So yeah, coming from that athlete's perspective, it's really when you don't, whether you speak up or not, at the end of the day, you're thinking to yourself, I need to make the right choice. I need to choose who the proper candidate is for that certain position.
Right. Dr. Enzo?
Yeah, so I'll just add, no, kasi Ria talk about, how do we start these political conversations. I think first and foremost, whether we like it or not, we have to acknowledge everything is political.
Yeah,
And, for us doctors, that's what we really not just realized, it got reinforced to us during the pandemic that health is political, right? Decisions about whether we should impose lockdowns or not, it's political. Whether we need to buy our vaccines from China or the US, it's political. Whether we need to pay better our nurses and doctors who are serving in the public hospitals, that is political. So that is very important. Parang, especially now we're talking about the elections. We just need to acknowledge it. But we can be political without being partisan and without being and while being respectful, no? Sorry, James, I'll use this metaphor. We don't need to do karate chops to people that we disagree with, right? Although karate is a very respectful sport, right? We can have, it's not just about healthy people. I think now we should be talking about healthy discourse and healthy politics. Yan ang kailangan nating buuin at ipanumbalik, no, sa Pilipinas. I think naman nung unang panahon, we can talk about politics without, really, having very, big fights and being too emotional or being even, disrespectful, right? Ngayon naririnig natin yung cancel culture, yung mga ganong konsepto. We can still have very strong and important debates. But at the end of the day, we're all concerned about the future of the country and the welfare of our people. And so I think that is something that we need to, really reorient yung conversations. And I know the online world makes it a bit difficult, no? I think because, we have limited, physical access to each other, like face-to-face, or, we're not in the same room. I think people now are bolder to even be less respectful, right? We see that on Twitter. We see that in social media. So, this cloak of even anonymity, right? Parang sa Harry Potter, di ba, may cloak, may invisible cloak, right? Social media gives us that kind of ability, and that should not be used as an excuse to be disrespectful to others and start very healthy political discussions.
That's a good reminder. Pwede ka naman mag-argue, pero hindi naman kailangan na bastos ka habang nag-argue. I have a question / comment coming from Neil Juntado. He agrees with Ria that sometimes it becomes an echo chamber, especially on social media. The algorithm puts people of the same interest together, and in the end, I think we do not reach the communities we need to reach out to. Do you think it's time and possible that we bring the discussion to the ground? So let's talk about actually going beyond our online spaces. Paano ba yun? How is that even possible in the context of a pandemic? Siguro si Doc. Sige, go, Ria. Yeah, kasi with the youth vote, right? Like you have a lot of activities are online, but you also do offline things. So how does that work?
It's a lot harder, definitely, but thankfully, when you find partner organizations nga in the grassroots talaga, that's really what strengthens it. And I think that's really what we need also now, to partner with like schools, like I said earlier, diba? Schools, maybe, I don't know, youth groups and all of that, because that's where the action is eh. Yung parang sila yung kailangan nating, like, yung mga bago especially, like assure them that, you know, your vote matters. I know that a lot of people have lost trust in the system and the transparency and the integrity, but I think it is also like, you can do it more through schools and youth groups talaga. Okay, I'm gonna go back to what I said. Basta yun, youth groups.
Yeah, and I heard Bea, you called my name, so I'll follow Ria. You know, it's challenging. I mean, Ria was saying we should have these conversations in schools, right? Although I think it was just yesterday or a few days ago when we heard from Malacanang that President Duterte is still not for face-to-face or returning to face-to-face schooling. And so that's actually going to be a challenge. How can we have those conversations inside the school when the children are actually, or even adolescents or young adults who are, you know, part of the voting population are not able to convene physically to have conversations. So it's going to be really challenging. A while ago, I said that our goal as a country should be to ensure that the elections happen in whatever form, right? And you know, if you look at the year that has passed, there is a dozen countries that, despite the pandemic, still held elections and still held them even in at least a hybrid or a face-to-face manner. So there's so many ways that actually government, COMELEC for instance, and maybe now we need a multi-sectoral approach to making sure that the elections happen. You know, the private sector, you know, for example, NAMFREL, diba? It's a private sector initiative. Now, how can we develop, you know, something like NAMFREL, or maybe NAMFREL can assume this role, but making sure the election is, you remember the acronym HOPE, honest, orderly, and peaceful elections, right? I think we need to make it HOPES, honest, orderly, peaceful elections that is safe, right? That is safe. And the example from other countries have shown to us that you can still hold elections that are safe. Think of the US, right? They had their elections in November. You know, Singapore, you know, Mongolia, Macedonia, Dominican Republic. There's a list of countries actually that held elections. And by the way, that is during the time when the vaccine is not yet available.
Yeah.
So we are in a very different situation now, which is a bit more optimistic. Although what's pessimistic in me is that the vaccine rollouts are still very slow. So if we really want the elections to happen face-to-face or hybrid, one, accelerate the vaccine rollouts. You know, we need to make sure that the majority of the Filipinos are actually vaccinated as early as possible so that we can hold the elections next year in May, face-to-face or again hybrid. But also I hope that, you know, COMELEC and all the other agencies that are involved in this, you know, grand project of electing the next leaders, I hope they're all preparing all the protocols needed, right? Ensuring there's, disinfection in the precincts, right? Dapat wala na yung mga physical materials, no? Kasi we know that it can also help, you know, transmit, COVID, although at a very minimal rate. Temperature checks in, mga presinto. Of course, wearing of masks will still remain, even if you get vaccinated, because while you may not have the disease, you might pass the disease still. So, and of course, socially distanced elections. There's so many ways that we can actually, so many measures that we can adopt. And I hope that our election officials are already preparing for these scenarios.
I think James.
Well, Doc, there's also what's come into my mind as well, like, given the fact that we are, we're already adopting to a new normal, and especially like we're trying to also have a peaceful election. I'm not saying that, like it'll go smoothly, because, everything has its imperfections, because yes, also I do believe that there might be issues also with the new way of voting, of having a proper election. But then what's also come to my mind is like, how long do you think that the whole country will finally get into herd immunity? That's what I've actually been thinking about.
Sure. I mean, I'll answer it. So if you look at the DOH website and also the international, WHO even, unfortunately, only 2% of our population. Remember, we have around 110 million Filipinos. Only 2% are fully vaccinated, and around 5% have at least one dose. So it's still a long way to go, right? Although, the recent news that we're able to acquire, Pfizer, many doses, millions of doses, that's good news. We need to make sure, the vaccines reach the arms of, many Filipinos as fast as possible. Regarding herd immunity, there's actually one Twitter account that is monitoring, the pace of our vaccination rates. And the estimate is that given the current pace, we'll only reach herd immunity by February 2023, which is, more than around 2 years from now. So, the elections will happen before that, right? And so, again, I think the vaccine rollout should be made much faster. It's a welcome development that, we're procuring more doses by the day. But also we need to address what we're seeing now on the ground. No? Narinig niyo na ba yung vaccine hesitancy? Because people are, because of all the infodemic, another term, infodemic that we see in social media, people are afraid to take their vaccines, right? In fact, hindi na lang ngayon vaccine hesitancy, brand hesitancy na ang nakikita. So, kaya, di ba, inaabangan, pag Pfizer, pag Sinovac, hindi tayo pupunta. So I think we have a critical role to play in terms of encouraging more Filipinos to vaccinate so that we can have more Filipinos going to the precinct to vote, right? And finally, Ria, kanina, you mentioned 60 million Filipinos na ang registered. We need to also reach 60 million people vaccinated, right? If we really want to hold a very honest, orderly, peaceful elections, that is safe. Hopes.
That is a huge number to reach. Paterno, akala mo hindi kita papasalitain. How is COMELEC preparing? How are political parties preparing also? And how are you preparing to cover an election during a pandemic?
Sa totoo lang, malabo pa yung magiging mga rules para sa campaigning. Yan talaga yung pinaka posibleng stumbling block Kasi paano mag-ensure ng distancing kapag nagkakampanya in person? Kung hindi naman in person, kunyari online yung pangangampanya, marami rin kailangang aralin kagaya ng yung panunuhol sa mga botante. Nasanay na yung mga tao sa GCash. Paano mo monitor yon? I-GCash lang yung suhol sa botante. Diba? Tapos yung mga political ads. So, ang namomonitor ng COMELEC usually yung mga nasa dyaryo at yung mga nasa TV at isusuma nila kung ilang minuto yon at pag lumagpas ka doon, bawal yon, bawal ka lumagpas doon. Bawal ka lumagpas doon sa permitted number of ads sa dyaryo. Paano naman kung internet?
May ganun ba for social media? Wala pa, di ba?
Merong mga rules para sa social media. Pero kung gaano karami yung rules, 100 times more yung loopholes. Kagaya kunyari, may ipapalabas ako na advertisement, si Bea kunyari tumatakbo na Pangulo, Bea for President. May lumabas na advertisement, Bea, iboto si Bea. Sino nagpalabas ng advertisement na yon? Sabi ni Bea, hindi ako nagpalabas niyan. Ano yan? Supporter ko yan. So,
Fan ko lang.
Counted ba yan sa pagbibilang nung yung expenses niya? Yun namang mga lumalabas din sa yung mga sangkatutak na mga advertisement na lumalabas sa kunyari sa TikTok, sa Facebook. Yan, hindi lang yan governed by campaign rules, pero pati yung algorithm ng Facebook at ng mga social media platforms kagaya ng TikTok. So, ang daming sinuserve sa'yo ng mga kung ano-anong mga propaganda, day in and day out. Hindi makahabol yung COMELEC dahil yung mga election laws natin napaka-antiquated. Yung Omnibus Election Code, yung pinakabatas para sa election, 1985 pa yun. Ngayon, hindi naman mabago-bago ng husto. So, hindi makahabol yung institusyon doon sa teknolohiya. So, yan yung isa sa mga roadblocks. Ngayon, yan yung isang magpapahirap sa eleksyon, yung mga isa sa mga hamon. Pangalawang hamon, yung pag-i-ensure din ng independence ng Commission on Elections. And alam nyo ba, na ngayon, karamihan ng mga COMELEC commissioner, majority sa kanila ay taga Davao. In-appoint ni Pangulong Duterte. So hindi naman ibig sabihin yan na fair or unfair kaagad, hindi ba? Unfair naman
Pero statement of fact lang.
And hindi naman ibig sabihin na magiging patas o hindi magiging patas ang COMELEC kaagad, hindi ba? But of course, it would bring alarm bells for us kasi, ganun. Kailangan maging mapagmatsyag din yung tao dun sa independence ng Commission on Elections. Papalapit yung halalan, makakapag-appoint pa si Pangulong Duterte ng mga bagong miyembro pa. 7 ang miyembro ng Commission on Elections, magre-retire ang 3 pa sa Feb. So maglalagay uli si Pangulong Duterte doon ng mga kapalit. So kailangan antabayanan din yan. Bukod pa yan doon sa pandemya, yung pandemya malaking problema. Yung ganitong pagmamatsyag, ito, huwag din natin kakalimutan yan, pandemic or no pandemic.
Meron pang isa pang problema na tinatanong ng isang participant in the webinar. Aside from money, do you believe vaccines will play a role in the never-ending vote buying that's happening in the Philippines? I think what John Luis Antoc is referring to is like, may danger bang ganun na gagamitin yung vaccination to buy votes or to woo voters in the elections? And is there a law that may way ba to protect us from that? Kung sakaling i-exploit yan ng the politicians.
Nako, ito Bea ang may isasagot ko kay Jan. Jan, kung naisip mo yan,
naisip na rin yun.
Yung kalooban mo, naisip mo yan, papaano pa yung mga hindi busilak ang kalooban? Naisip na talaga nila yan. At actually, ginagawa na yan sa mga barabarangay, kahit pa simple pa. At sigurado tayo na may mga nakahanda na silang mga plano para dyan, yung mga politiko na gustong manlamang sa iba. Sigurado yan. Kaya kailangan na maging mapagmatsyag. At maganda yung nagtanong ka dyan, dahil dyan nagsisimula yung pagiging mapagmatsyag, yung pagtatanong. Kapag tayo hindi nagtanong, ay wala nang mangyayari sa atin.
Pwede ako magdumagdag, no? And from a public health perspective, number one, ang mga bakuna, ang mga gamot, hindi natin dapat gagamitin yan. Ginagamit na, bribe, 'di ba? Na, sige, bibigyan kita ng ayuda basta magpakabakuna ka. Hindi pwede yon, right? Kasi may tinatawag tayo na, autonomy. Hindi nga actually mandatory ang pagbabakuna, 'di ba? Kung nasa authoritarian tayo na bansa, siguro yun ang gagawin, no? Pero nasa demokrasya tayo at ang bawat mamamayan bawat individual, that person can say yes or no to even medical treatment, right? You know, may cancer ka, gagamutin ba kita? You have the right to say no if you think it's not for you, di ba? Same thing with vaccine. So hindi siya pwede na gamiting again, you know, bribe or you know, what do you call this? You know, to force someone to do something, no? Of course, the question is it possible? Sabi nga ni Paterno, dahil naisip mo siya, naisip na rin ng mga politiko yon. At kailangan natin talaga maging mapagmatsyag, no? If you look back at the history of, you know, the Philippine health system, hindi ito bago kasi nung ang PhilHealth ay, remember PhilHealth, hindi ko alam kung buhay na kayo or may mulat na kayo nung ang PhilHealth ay, you know, binabayaran pa ng mga local government, mayor, right? So, may pag-aaral nga na tuwing malapit ang eleksyon, dumadami yung PhilHealth members. Kasi ang pinamimigay ay PhilHealth cards doon sa mga botante or prospective na botante. Of course, dahil naipasa ang Universal Healthcare Law noong panahon ni Pangulong Aquino, ang PhilHealth naging mandatory, right? Hindi na siya nasa discretion ng mayor. So, you know, it's not going to be surprising or shocking kung ang mga kandidato maghahanap ng iba pang medical commodity na gagamiting election you know, material or you know, a bribe, and kailangan nating maging vigilant kasi bawal yon. Again, from a medical and public health perspective.
Okay, I'm checking questions kung meron pa dito. I think yung isang general concern is how do we ensure a safe and honest election? Paka-loaded ng tanong yun, no? As if Comelec tayo, makakagawa tayo ng ano. Pero paano nga ba yun? How can we ensure that, one, obviously, it's safe from the COVID pandemic and other dangers, and second, it's an honest election given all the restrictions around us?
Well, actually, Bea, kung titignan natin yung mga vaccination centers, dumudumog din naman ang mga tao dyan eh. At ang mga tao nagkukumpulan din naman dyan in a way. So nakikita naman natin na nagagawa ito sa mga vaccination center. Siguro naman posible ring magawa yan sa mga polling centers. Kaya hindi magiging excuse na hindi kaya eh. Kita mo nga, baka nga mas marami pa yung nagpapabakuna, yung pumipila sa bakuna kaysa dun sa boboto. Ang pagboto ang mga steps ng pagbabakuna mas onte kaysa sa pagboto. Walang 30-minute observation period ang botante. Hindi kagaya ng mga nagpabakuna, hindi ba? So,
Oy minsan yung machine mo hindi gumagana. So di ba nasa stock ka? Anyway, sige, sorry. Continue.
Naman yun. So, yung ganyan. So, pero pagdating sa yung mga sistema in place, nagawa na rin yan a few months back nga sa Palawan. Sa Palawan plebiscite. At marami na doong mga na-eksperimento yung Comelec, kagaya nung hiwa-hiwala yung mga kung gaano kalaki yung distansya sa mga voting booth, yung may mga plastic barrier doon. So marami namang mga paraan. Alam mo, ang mas mahirap na sagutin sa tanong mo yung honest election. Pero yan kahit walang pandemya, problema natin yan.
Right.
Yeah. Tama ka, Paterno, no? Yung honesty, yung honesty, no? Transparency, that's a pre-pandemic issue, not a COVID issue, no? I think, and kanina, di ba, Bea, nilista ko na rin yung mga pwedeng gawin sa presinto, no? I'm wondering kung may scheduling ng kung kailan ka pupunta para bumoto, di ba? I think nagawa na natin siya for many things during the time of COVID, right? Like, kung you can't just go to even the hospital or the clinic, right? Na walk in. And we're saying the battlefield now is digital. Then let's try to use the digital means to create these kinds of systems, staggered voting hours, for example. I think may mga bansang gumawa niyan. I'm not sure if the Philippines is ready for again,
Mail-in.
online or mail-in ballots, right? Again, kasi because of the fears around the integrity of the elections, or advanced voting. Although, of course, for example, the distance, the long distance ballot or voting, diba? Distance voting. Ginagawa na natin yan for our OFWs, diba? So, marami na tayong mga, sabi nga ni Paterno kanina, yung experiment sa Palawan, I think the vaccination campaigns now are a dress rehearsal for that election next year, no? And kailangan ganun yung mindset. Pag ang mindset mo agad is, no elections, diba? Kasi, magkukumpul-kumpulan, we will not be able to reap the lessons that we are seeing now, no? As we conduct our vaccination campaigns and also the other lessons from our past experiences.
Mag-try tayo mag-imagine ng scenario. Pero how should politicians, advocacy groups, even individuals reach out with safety still in mind? Maybe we can start with James or Ria.
Well, okay, like as I mentioned also before that we are now moving to the online platforms now for a safer election. But my concern with this one is that everybody now has access to the internet, and that can be the internet can be easily manipulated with cyber attacks. So I believe that we should have people who basically have an expertise with IT to prevent these cyber attacks, these manipulations on the internet, so that people won't be harmed or misled. So that's what I believe with these in developing a much safer election if it were to be held online.
Ria?
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, we could transition onto online voting. But we're a little bit far from that because, we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. But personally, I think, like I said, okay. I think in relation din kanina to the vaccine talk, I think people tend to forget that healthcare and being able to vote are both rights and not privileges. And I think that's something that we have to remind people about, that this is your right. It's not just a privilege given to you. This is something that you should be doing. So I feel like if more people kind of become aware and get involved, then maybe things would be easier, because everybody would be, easier to get along with. Everybody would be trying to do something to make things easier for everybody else. And yeah, I think if anything, again, like individual, like when you go out to vote, really make sure that you're also protected. You wear your mask, maybe double mask, wear PPE if that makes you feel better, wear face shield. Like, we can start from the individual din kasi talaga, I think, in line with all of this. Even when it comes to the people that you vote for the people who have the same values as you. You vote for people who you feel like would be your voice, diba? Okay, I rambled.
Okay, because we were talking obviously about the pandemic and the 2022 elections. Clearly, magiging key talk point ito for politicians, for us in the media. Definitely, we will not ignore the fact that, the handling/mishandling of the pandemic. Pero kasi when you talk about the pandemic, ang daming sub-issues or sub-concerns. So, di ba, you have the economy, you have the healthcare system, you have individual health, and there's also future-proofing, right? Hopefully, umabot na rin tayo dun sa discussion of future-proofing. Like, for you, like on a personal level, and like also based on your discussions with friends, with groups, like, saan dito siguro yung either magiging pinaka-urgent or dapat maging urgent in the context of the 2022 elections, or in the context of what we're looking for sa mga politicians that we will be electing in May?
I think for me personally, I think individual health is the most urgent, because I know this sounds very cliche, health is wealth, but because if the more unhealthy people there are, I mean, our economy will, our economy will slow much down even more. That's why I feel that health is really the priority, and that's why we need to make sure that everybody follows. Okay, like if you don't, okay, if you refuse to have a vaccine, at least follow the safety protocols, keep on your mask, and maintain social distancing. Because really, as there will be more sick people once again, it'll greatly affect our economy and the performance of our country.
You know, that's not a cliche at all. Kasi honestly, I did not really consider my health. Like, hindi siya center of my mind na parang, like, I always took for granted the fact that I could run to the ER if something bad happened. I could go to the clinic if something bad happened. I think this pandemic na also heightened that individually, di ba? Yung sobrang maingat ka na, sobrang cautious ka na in your interaction. So, yeah. Anybody wanted to add?
I agree. I agree with James. Health right now, because I feel like this is the biggest threat that we have right now. Like for the economy to start moving, businesses have to be open. But how do we get there unless everyone's healthy, diba? So yeah, I agree completely.
So, of course, as the health person, no? Not necessarily healthy, right? Health
Ano
person.
kaya yung sagot ni Doc?
Right. You know, I'm thrilled to hear from James and Rhea that health really should be front and center in the elections discussion, right? In the discourse. And admittedly, you know, health is not always top of mind. No, as you said, Bea, right? It's not top of mind when we talk about the elections. I think, you know, only in the US when health and healthcare access, for example, is a very divisive election issue. So that's you know, something that you know, I can anticipate, and we should make it an election issue. You know, health, you know, the recovery of the healthcare system, but also ensuring that, you know, remember, universal healthcare, hindi pa rin natin naaabot yan ngayon, no? It's still a dream on paper. And then COVID-19 made it much more difficult to achieve universal healthcare when you hear, you know, hospitals already overwhelmed, nurses are already burned out and they're not anymore reporting to work. And then you have PhilHealth that is, you know, marred by a lot of corruption allegations. You know, all of these will need to be addressed by the next administration. Having said that, you know, I think the economy is also important. And you know what? This friction between health and the economy, I think that friction is fiction. You know, we need health in order to drive a healthy economy, but we also need an economy to fuel, you know, the health engine, which is the people. So the two, you know, are important. It takes two to tango. So itong, you know, pinagbabanggaan lagi natin sila, health ako, hindi ako for economy, that's actually a false dichotomy. It's really about creating policies that will address the health crisis so that the economy can be easily revived. But of course, as we've seen, you know, the, you know, perhaps indecisiveness and the, you know, implementation challenges that we have observed in the pandemic response have actually led to a prolonged and delayed recovery of the economy, right? And so we need to really find that, you know, really, you know, right equation to make sure health and economy are advanced and restored.
But there, no, based on what politicians are already saying, what people on the street are already saying, and even surveys, ano kaya dito, saan dito, or saan dito dapat yung maging major focus ng politicians and ng voters come 2022?
Nabanggit na yung leadership, yung health, nabanggit na yung economy, pero
yes,
ang isa-stress ko talaga, yung overarching theme is leadership. Because ang problema lang kapag sinabi natin na health ang priority, kapag ba ako ay healthy na, kapag yung aking mga kaibigan ay healthy na, o yung mga kasama ko sa lugar ko ay healthy na, okay na yan. Hindi eh. Ang health ay bahagi ng umbrella ng management, ng leadership. So, ang ating bang gobyerno ay nag-lead sa atin, namumuno ng maayos. So, yun yung sana hindi natin malimutan pag-isipan eh. At sana yun yung hahanapin ng mga Pilipino. Hindi lang yung mabilis makaligaw eh. Kunyari magpili ka ng iba-ibang aspeto. Ito, maka-West Philippine Sea. O sige, okay yan. O ito, healthcare. O okay yan. Okay nga. Pero ang tanong, ito ba ay okay na leader? At ito yung mga elemento na meron siya, mga iba-ibang aspeto na meron siya. Pwedeng mahina sa isa, malakas sa isa, pero sa kabuuan, ito ba ay klase ng tao na susundin ko? Ito ba ay klase ng tao na mamumuno ng maayos para tayo ay healthy at ang ekonomiya natin ay buhay? So leadership talaga eh, leadership. So yun yung hinahanap ng tao, lalo na ngayong pandemya. Yung mga tao parang naliligaw, hindi mo alam kung saan ka pupunta, hanap ka ng leader eh. Pero yung totoong leader sana. So yun yung hanapin natin sana ngayong eleksyon.
Okay. Look for someone na not just to steer the Philippines through this pandemic, but actually has a vision for the country, diba? Beyond 2022, obviously. I want to ask a question from Mariah Jillian Koo. With hearing the news about the possible candidates who are being convinced or being looked or considered to run for positions, how can we be able to convince others who feel discouraged to partake in voting for the national elections without meaning to disparage other candidates or the names being floated? Na parang I get that sentiment a lot in social media na people are discouraged or parang yun na naman, ito na naman, wala nang ibang options. How can we encourage them? Basically yung tanong na to, paano ba natin sila mako-convince na mag-care pa rin, even if they look at 2022 and say, oh my God, it's hopeless, I don't see hope in this election. Naging philosophical yung tanong bigla, no?
Ang hirap, Bea, ha? Even
That's a hard question.
That's a hard question to answer. Because personally, parang ang hirap talaga. You really can't... Hi.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time answering this one.
Well, I guess, we should be asking similarly hard questions to our leaders and to those who are vying for, again, leadership positions, right? Nahirapan na nga tayo sagutin, no? Pero I think, Bea, what you're trying, and to Mariah, like she's trying to ask, about how to still keep hopeful. Is that one way of interpreting it?
How to introduce hope for those who are maybe a little jaded.
Right.
Maybe given the experience of the last administration or the last 15 months, or baka nga, parang what they see in the news, they don't see names or faces that inspire them to go out and care.
Admittedly, part of me is still very hopeful, especially with the youthful energy that I'm seeing, for example, in social media. So, let's also discuss the positives, right, that have emerged during the pandemic. For example, and I want to introduce another term, no? Alam niyo yung term na pandemic, which means a disease that is existing in many countries, right? There's also another term, syndemic. Kasi right now, we are seeing multiple epidemics at the same time, no? The epidemic of course, COVID, but also the epidemic of loneliness, mental health, no? The epidemic of joblessness, the epidemic of, corruption and bad governance. So there's so many epidemics, right? But what I saw is despite the occurrence of this endemic, no, a lot of the young people in social media have actually, come together. Ang dami ko nakikita mga mental health support groups, no, online, no, Twitter Spaces. Ang dami ng mga conversations na nagaganap, no, about pressing issues. So I think, yes, the battlefield now has become digital, and our power as young people has also become digital, our tools. So So I'm optimistic, and ako nga parang sana our goal is how can we channel our digital energy to real energy, real world energy, right? How can we use these conversations online, the tweets that we make, and turn them into real action on the ground? And we're not thinking about, just the big transformations. Even in small little ways, in your household, in your community, if you're a teacher, how can you change the conversations in the classroom? If you're working in the call center, how can you influence your colleagues? No, there's so many ways that we can do this, again, positive transformation, one tweet at a time, one step at a time. So how can we channel that positive energy that this pandemic actually has generated in the online world? So my hope, no, and I think the hope is in the young people. Sometimes I imagine, or I even hope, no, na sana tumanda na agad tayo, and so we can replace the current ones in power. So I'll stop there.
Why wait? Bakit kailangan natin mag-intay na tumanda? Paterno?
Well, yun nga yung pinaka challenge at yung sinabi ko kanina. At bukod doon, yung mga butante sana hindi nawawalan ng pag-asa. Talagang yun ang isa-stress ko eh. Dahil kung wala tayong sense of hope, para saan pa kaya tayo bumuboto? Para sa status quo? So yun yung mahalaga na pag-isipan talaga natin. Lalo na yung mga kabataan na nanonood sa atin ngayon. Kasama tayo dun sa kabataan na yun. Lahat tayo ang mga kabataan.
Ipagpilit mo pa, sige.
So yun. Yun yung pag-isipan talaga natin. At hindi lang pag-isipan, damhin.
Yeah. I want to touch again on what babalik ako sa sinabi ni Ria sa akin months back, di ba? Na parang yun nga, parang it's not about having 1,000 followers or more than 1,000 or tens of thousands of followers. Ultimately, guys, kahit sa group chat mo lang, alam mo yun, magsalita ka lang sa group chat mo in spaces where you're comfortable engaging. I think that we shouldn't underestimate the power of our voice, even in such a small group, like 5 people in a group chat. Important na yun. Or malaking bagay na rin yun kahit paano. Okay, we have no more questions. Kung may mga tanong pa, habol kayo. But perhaps to conclude this discussion, no, parang the stakes are high in 2022, all the more crucial because in spite of the coronavirus pandemic, kayo, what do you want to be addressed, discussed, or championed by politicians, especially politicians? Like, these are the people who are basically nag-job application sila sa atin, di ba? To be our leaders in the coming 3 or 6 years, depending on what position. Like, beyond pandemic responses, like what personally would you want them to advocate in 2022?
Okay, so apart from health, I think, and apart from economy and better leadership, like what we discussed today, I think environment din talaga,
yeah,
and equality, because it's like these are things that should have already been addressed before pa, alam mo yun. And more than the pandemic, we also have environmental issues that do need to be addressed. And our country, there's a lot of typhoons that happen, a lot of natural disasters. So I feel like we do need to also step up in terms of the environment. Yeah, and yes, equality, definitely, because it's hard to say that our country is a safe space until everybody is welcomed and accepted and treated equally with respect.
Naalala ko yung discussion namin the last time about the youth vote naman, like one of the issues that was brought up that the youth do care about, like Gen Z, millennials, is definitely climate change, kasi they will be living through that in their adulthood or in their old age. No? James?
Actually thinking like, we were discussing about like who is the right leader to choose, like who can really lead our country to a better future. But, at the same time, we can't put all our blame on the government, because it's also us. We also have to look at ourselves in order to make the country a better place. No, I mean, like, and I'm really coming from a, and I'm being serious about it. Like, you also need to look at what you do, look at your actions. Like, what can you do also to make a change in our country? You have to also look at yourself. You can't just put the entire blame on the government, as I said earlier, because it's not entirely their fault. Look at yourself also. What are you doing to make this country better? So I believe we also need to change that mentality as well. Like, we can't just go pointing fingers and fault finding on others. We also have to be mature enough to accept the mistakes that we make, and also go on and do better from it, like make
Right.
up for it.
Right. I mean, and this election is a super big chance, obviously, to, diba, to correct the mistakes that we may have made in previous elections. Hopefully. Paterno?
Napapag-usapan natin yung mga iba-ibang mga promise o plataforma na inaasahan natin sa mga kandidato. Ako, ang ibabato ko dito ay tingin ko yung pinakamahalaga ngayong eleksyon na ito. Si Pangulong Duterte. Ano ang pananaw nila kay Pangulong Duterte? Kasi si Pangulong Duterte, hindi lang siya isang political personality. Isa na siya ngayong brand of leadership.
Yeah.
He is now a brand of leadership. Now, itong mga kandidato, iilag ba sila na pag-usapan yung ganitong touchy topic dahil baka mamaya matalo sila? O magiging matapang ba sila na talagang harapin? Dahil ito naman talaga ang nagpapalaki sa eleksyon na ito eh. Hindi naman ito inaabangan ng tao dahil lang sa pandemya eh. Inaabangan dahil magpapatuloy ba yung Duterte brand of leadership pagkatapos ng 2022?
Yeah.
Iba-iba yung sagot dyan, pero mahalagang mapag-usapan. So sana talagang mapag-usapan ng mga kandidato ito sa isang matalinong paraan na wala rin naman yung, sana wala yung mga labeling na DDS o dilawan, pero sa isang matalinong paraan na ang tinitake into consideration ay yung welfare ng karaniwang Pilipino, yung kapakanan ng karaniwang Pilipino. Sana yan ay mapag-usapan kakabit nung napakaraming issue na hinaharap ng Pilipinas ngayon.
The pandemic, human rights. Actually, parang ito nga eh, di ba? Parang it's a referendum, it's the mass testing, not of individuals, not of names and faces in Philippine politics, but a brand of politics, a kind of politics, and I guess values na rin na pinupuntahan ng Philippines. Doc Renzo.
Yeah, and because Bea, you mentioned the phrase mass testing, naisip ko, I think it's also a mass testing in terms of what kind of country and people we are, right?
Yeah.
This election will actually tell us what kind of people we are, right? I'm seeing Rhea touching, medyo kinilabutan, no? When you think about it, it will actually be, parang nakatingin tayo sa mirror, and whatever decision we will make in this upcoming election, that's actually us telling to ourselves, this is the kind of people we are. And Paterno was also mentioning about Duterte being really a figure, and people look to him in many different ways. Sabi ko, kailangan natin ng mga role models talaga na makabago at alternatibo. Pero naalala ko kaka-birthday lang niya noong Sabado, si Dr. Jose Rizal, kasi I live in Calamba. I'm actually speaking from Calamba. And on his birthday, I went to his house. And bigla ako napaisip, kung buhay kaya si Rizal ngayon, ano kaya ang gagawin niya sa panahon ng pandemya? Okay? So I think that is something we should also try to internalize. Rizal during his time, di ba, he was already envisioning the future of the country in the next 100 years. He actually wrote about it. And he was trying to be a good ancestor to all of us. Now is the time where in a very, kanina nga Bea, you acknowledge the historical, the historical significance of the time. Parang tayo ngayon si Rizal. Ano yung gusto nating sabihin about us nung mga kabataan 100 years from now? Do you want them to read the history books and say, oh, the COVID generation and the Duterte generation of 2021 were not good ancestors to us because they made the wrong decisions during the election of 2022? So nakita nyo, no? Parang it's really beyond the present. There's a very long-term and even historical significance of this election, of this pandemic. So our actions and decisions are so important. And I hope this realization will really lead us to internalize our civic duty. No, sabi mga Ria kanina, health is a right, but voting is a right. And they're also both responsibilities. So siguro, I'll just close by saying and also urging our audience, at this moment, as a Filipino, there are 3 things that you should do. And these are all starting with letter V. Okay? We need to vaccinate ourselves. We need to voice out our sentiments. And we need to vote in 2022.
Checklist na tayo, guys, courtesy of Doc Renzo. If there are any questions, you can actually ask our panelists. Because I'm gonna ask them now. If you have, what are your social media handles in case they wanna ask questions or engage with you or have proposals probably also for engagement online and offline. Quick round robin siguro of your social media handles if they wanna reach you. Kay Ria muna tayo kasi praktisado na si Ria dito.
Okay, so guys, you can catch me on Instagram at Ria, on Twitter, Ria Ataide. And yeah, thank you for having me again today. It's always nice to have a platform to be able to speak about my thoughts and try to spark any form of inspiration and still change, even if it means just one person. So thank you for giving me this opportunity today.
Thanks, Ria. James?
I want to thank you for really giving me this opportunity to speak here in this Rappler forum. To everybody watching, you can follow me on my Instagram, James De Los Santos, with dots in between. And I'm also, aside from being an athlete, I'm also a very active streamer on Kumu. You can check me out there, James De Los Santos as well. So yes, guys, it was also great sharing my own insights and my own opinions here in this forum. And thank you again for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Doc Renzo?
Yep. Thank you again for this opportunity. I'm not yet a TikToker nor a YouTuber. Maybe soon. But you can follow me on Twitter at Renzo Ginto, Instagram at Renzo Ginto. Very simple. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.
Paterno?
Follow at Rappler.com and hashtag PHVote and hashtag We Decide. Ang Twitter ko ay at Paterno _ the second, II. So, salamat sa pag-invite sa amin dito at sa lahat ng mga nag-attend. Sana hindi tayo lahat mawalan ng pag-asa.
Tandaan yung tatlong V ni Doc Renzo. Thank you so much for watching, wherever you're watching, YouTube, Facebook, Zoom. Thank you for sending in your questions. If you have any more questions, you can ask them on their social media. Today is June 23, less than a year before it's May 9, 2022. The deadline to register to vote for the first time, to update your records, to reactivate your voting record is in 99 days. Tama, Paterno. Hindi naman yun error. Okay. We're still in the middle of a pandemic, as we have discussed in the past hour and a half or so. And we know it's scary to go out, but please, if you're able, and with an abundance of caution, register to vote. And while you're at it, if you're qualified and able, get vaccinated against COVID-19. We will be linking resources both from Rappler and elsewhere in case you want to read up even more and if you have questions about voters registration and the elections. Konting plug, Move PH, Rappler's civic engagement arm, wants you to participate in the elections beyond voting. You can help fact check claims in social media during the elections and help debunk misleading information before they can shape public conversation. Cover the elections by highlighting issues in your community and get training to be a citizen journalist who will be reporting election-related issues and initiatives in your communities. Lead a movement in your community and help ramp up voters registration on September 30, 2021, as well as increase voter turnout on election day. You can visit the URL that's being flashed on screen. I can't see it, but I will trust that it's being flashed on screen. It's rplr.co/phvotechallenge. Again, rplr.co/phvotechallenge. This year's elections is crucial to the future of the Philippines. Rappler is currently gearing up to have coverage in key areas around the country. You can help us reach this goal by joining Rappler Plus. Visit rappler.com/plus. Again, the URL for the move.ph challenge is rplr.co/phvotechallenge. Tandaan natin, ikaw, dear voter, ang main character in the 2022 elections. This is our decision to make atin ang Pilipinas. You have been watching PH Vote Dialogues. This has been Bea Copin. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, guys. Bye!
Salamat.